Welcome back. We're at Whittlesea in Victoria, and this half hour we're looking at the environmental impact of the bushfire disaster, with the particular focus now on the role of climate change. And let's cross to Canberra, where Sky News chief political reporter Kieran Gilbert spoke late this week with Shadow Environment Minister Greg Hunt.
Shadow Environment Minister Greg Hunt, appreciate your time. First of all, as a Victorian, can I start by getting your personal reflections on what has been an horrific week?
Everybody in Victoria knows somebody who has in some way been affected. For myself, we've got 4 different groups of friends who in one way or another had their properties saved from the fire. None of them feel lucky. They all feel a slight sense of guilt because they know that deep tragedies happen for other people. I have, I think, 36 different CFA units in my electorate. All of them, every one of them, has dispatched young men and women and older men and women to the fire front, and they've been there throughout the last week, so that's the reality. Because
your electorate is Mornington Peninsula and obviously country areas, so it's a fire-prone area as well.
We have hills, we have bush. It's very parallel. We are in fact the southern equivalent of the Yarra Ranges, and it's very close to home wherever you are in Victoria, but in an area like mine, the Mornington Peninsula and Western Port, people live, understand, they work with the concept of fire, and they know how tragic it is.
Okay, well, as someone who is familiar with the threat and as Shadow Environment Minister, what's your view on the claim that's been made in certain quarters that the green ideology has outweighed the need to minimise the fuel in our bush, that the Greens have stopped the burn backs that are needed to contain this threat?
I think every Royal Commission and every inquiry since the 1939 bushfires in Victoria have said that prescribed burning or fuel reduction can help mitigate, can help limit the extent of the fires. It's a bushfire zone. It's like living in an earthquake zone. So you can't stop fires occurring, but hopefully you can help limit and mitigate them. Fuel reduction is the one thing we can control. I'm certainly not going to get into blame at this point in time. I do think that the Royal Commission will face strong evidence about underburning, that the Royal Commission will be led evidence from very experienced people, which is likely to say our planning approach has not encouraged sufficient protection. I don't think that would have stopped fires like this on a day of such enormous conditions, but I do think it could have mitigated, and I do think going forwards we can mitigate, and we can do more by engaging in wide-scale, deep, carefully thought-through fuel reduction.
Do you think there have been some simplistic arguments made in the early days to be critical of the environmental sort of movement for minimising and arguing the minimisation of those burn backs? Do you think some of the claims in the early days have been a bit simplistic?
I think the Premier of Victoria said something very wise. He said that in the worst broad fire conditions we've ever had other than 1939 on Black Friday, nothing could have stopped fires, and I think that that was wise, correct and right. But he and others have also countenanced the fact that minimising fuel could have at least mitigated it. The extent to which, I don't know. But going forwards, what's our duty? Our duty is to minimise the likelihood and to minimise the impact. We will never avoid fires in Victoria. We can try and decrease the effects. I think it's wrong and inappropriate to try and level blame, but I think that there is a policy gap, and I think that the Royal Commission is likely to be led very strong evidence on the importance of fuel reduction and perhaps the fact that we have underdone that in Victoria.
So that's not the only area either that will be addressed in the Royal Commission. The Premier, Mr Brumby, wants everything on the table, and included in that, and again I want to get your thoughts on it, the policy of stay and fight or evacuate. Should there be days like the ferocious day that we had last week where people don't have the choice, that they are just evacuated, a mandatory movement of people?
Well, I think it's incredibly hard to make it mandatory. The fire authorities have talked about the fact that if you get large numbers of people on the road in a chaotic situation, the road can be the most dangerous place. What we've done here, what we saw in Victoria, is the CFA the day before, and I was with a CFA board member on the Friday before the fires, said this is the worst we have faced. Black Friday, 1939, and now these are the worst possible conditions. So I think the message is very clear here that there's no good policy of stay or go when you're in the height of an inferno. Hopefully, I think we can have mums and dads and children move out of an area voluntarily if there is even the slightest prospect on the days that are off the scale. I think a mandatory move in the midst of a fire is something of which I'd be very cautious.
Okay, Greg Hunt, to all of the members of the CFA from your electorate and the CFA across Victoria, we wish them all the very best in what is obviously an ongoing difficult situation.
They are good people, and what you've seen is people from throughout Victoria and Australia show the best of what we can be in, I think, the worst of times.
Absolutely. Good on you, Greg Hunt. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And the bushfires have